My friends, in the event that you are new to this wonderful card game and you have not yet signed up for a UGN Play account, you can now sign up with my exclusive referral code Alliteration and get yourself 50 bonus loyalty points for free, as well as additional loyalty points for every event that you play in within my referral code period. Why do you need these, you might ask? Well, loyalty points can be used to redeem free promotional cards in the mail, as well as other exclusive items coming in the future. The bonus points from using my code are enough to redeem almost any promo card right off the bat, and having your UGN account is going to allow you to accrue and track more and more as you go through your hero or villain's journey. If free cards and progression all sound super appealing to you, the links for all of this are going to be in the description below. Now, let's get on to the video. Good evening, my dear MHA CCG viewers. Welcome to another Alliteration gaming video. My name's Levi, and today we are delving into the almighty tier list again. Nationals are over, we've got a brand new ban list in place, and there's just a lot to talk about since the last time we did this. And it has been quite a while since the last time we did this. The previous Crimson Rampage tier list was like back in August-ish, kind of near the tail end of it after the set came out, and that's quite a hefty amount of time. Really, the main reason that I wanted to put this off for so long and didn't do one like right after set 3 came out or before Nationals or something is because I think, quite frankly, the window between set 3 coming out and then Nationals was so small that there was probably a lot of like mid-tier stuff that people just weren't testing or hadn't figured out yet that probably demanded quite a higher spot on the list. But since Nationals was so close to being around the corner, people were primarily focused on just testing the things that they already knew were good and making them the best they could be. And especially like the real good brewers of the community, like the true like mad scientists out there, were probably not working on like the best like Nezu or the best like Bakugo 1 build or something like that post set 3. They were just focused on refining the things we already knew were quite good because topping Nationals was pretty important. So that's why I elected to do something else like the good, the bad, and the aggro, to instead just talk about the higher end of decks, because that's what really was important to talk about at the time, and I just don't think that you could have a very intelligent conversation about a lot of the lower end of decks simply because they hadn't been figured out yet. Now though, all of that is in the past, and unless you're one of the lucky few making their way to the HLC event in Vegas, you are probably working on some more fun, rogue, or niche decks now, and I think the community has now explored enough of those while also still maintaining a big focus on the best decks, because the HLC is still a pretty important event to do well in. So I can finally now come full circle and give you guys a post Heroes Clash, post ban list HLC meta worlds tier list. Before we get into it, I've got two elephants in the room that I want to address. The first one being is that, guys, this is just my tier list. These are just my opinions based on my personal experiences with these characters. If I put Asui 2 all the way down in D tier because I think that character is just very bad, but maybe you've got a locals guy who has been absolutely raffle stomping you with her, I don't know about that guy. I don't know about that deck. I cannot translate that experience into consistent enough facts to make it a real result that I can put on my personal tier list. My tier list is only going to be as complete and all-encompassing as my experiences and the knowledge that I've gained from them, and also other people's experiences that I've been able to hear about and just witnessing games across the community and my time and space in it, which is by no means going to be 100%, but it's going to be close enough to where I feel like I'm able to give you a fairly confident and, dare I say, definitive version of a tier list. Elephant number 2 is that this is probably going to be a very long video. There are, I think, 85 playable characters in the game right now, and logistically speaking, if I spent 30 seconds max talking about every single one of those characters, the video is like 40 minutes by default, barring any intros. So when it comes to the not so relevant characters, I'm probably going to be very brief so that I can actually have an ample amount of time past 30 seconds to talk about the fairly relevant characters, which there are still a lot of. With all that being said, let's get into our tier list. The first thing to break down are my categories. First up is the S tier. These are our top dogs. These are simply put the best decks in the room. These are decks that have the highest chance of winning, and I'd be very surprised if every single deck wasn't in the top cuts of most big events. Next up is the A tier. These are our very competitive decks. These decks are all extremely good. I could see absolutely every single one of them topping an event, and I also wouldn't be terribly surprised to see them win the event sense as well. These decks are, in my opinion, the definition of what a good deck in this game should be. They all just have very, very solid game plans that they're able to execute very consistently, and most of the time edge out their games no matter the circumstances. They simply just aren't as unfair as a lot of the decks in the S tier are. After that, we have the good old B tier. The B tier decks are all honestly very strong and very solid in their own rights. A lot of them can take on the A tier decks. They probably just struggle quite a bit when it comes to fighting the top dogs in the game. At the end of the day, these decks all probably have very solid, consistent game plans. They're just a little too honest in the way they do it. They don't cheat the game, and they don't cheat the mechanics and the rules of the games. They don't break those rules in really, really obnoxious and meaningful ways, and so they're kind of just always going to be kept down by how honest they are. After that, we're going to step into the C tier. The C tier, this is probably going to be the biggest tier here. The C tier here is going to be just all of the very decent and very solid characters in this game. I wouldn't quite say mediocre, I think just average. They are all at the absolute worst just okay, and they're all characters that really could skyrocket with a sizable amount of like support. And then lastly, all the way down here is the D tier. These are flat out the underwhelming characters. These are characters that I would definitely consider bad under most circumstances. Usually there is just no real reason to be playing them. There's probably much better characters doing exactly what they want to do, but in a superior way, and they probably just need some specific support. You're gonna find a lot of the really niche strategy characters in here, ones that like try to bring a new niche into the game and simply didn't come alongside the cards that they really needed to push it, so they're kind of just left out in the wind wanting. These are all just those characters that feel bad to play. You play them and they just flat out feel like they're missing something, like they weren't tested a ton, or that they just weren't put out with any of the cards needed to prop up their strategy. I do shudder to call any character or deck like bad in this game, but this is probably the closest I would get within my D tier. In addition to the descriptions of all said categories, they're also going to be broken down into kind of two halves. There's really going to be like I'm not necessarily going to order them like character by character, like, oh, this one is better than this one is better than this one, and so on and so forth. It's going to be more so like the top half and the bottom half of B tier, for an example. Defining the strength to be like character by character is kind of too tedious for my personal taste, but I do like there to be a pretty clear distinction between the top half of this tier versus the bottom half of it. Speaking of defining things, let's get right into it. First off, we're gonna have Moneta 1. This character is okay. I think I'd probably put him somewhere in the bottom half of C tier. He doesn't really blow me away, but his game plan is pretty solid. He has some decent abilities on him. I just don't think the way he enables that concept is super strong in any particular way, and especially not in any way that like Moneta 2 or any other card pull stuffing character does better. Next up, we got Momo. Momo is looking really good right now, guys. Way up here at the top of A tier. I think Momo's fantastic right now. Momo didn't get any worse, really. A lot of the other decks just got much better in set 3, and she didn't really receive a lot from set 3, but she did get some tools, and at the end of the day, she just didn't really need them. Momo was in a strong place already. The only thing that really knocked her down to size going into the new set 3 meta is the really fast OTK decks kind of brought her down a little bit, because they could kill her before she could wall up really well, but those aren't quite as good at turn 2ing anymore. So a Momo that can get to turn 3 a lot more in this new Crow and Frogless world is a much stronger Momo, in my opinion. Next up, we're looking at Nomu. I think Nomu is also okay, probably somewhere in the bottom half of C tier as well. I think he's fine. I think he's actually kind of poised to take on a lot of the stronger matchups like Kirishima and Tokoyami pretty uniquely well. He's also not super bad into Jiro. Being able to make any Jiro move 6 damage is pretty nice. As terrifying as Nomu can be, if you can block all of his moves, he is just a very vanilla 5-hand size character. And the more you scale higher competitively, the better that a lot of the decks and players are going to be at doing that. Next up, we'll look at Ochako 1. Ochako 1 I think is really good. I think I'd put her like somewhere in the bottom half of A tier. I don't think she's like quite as there as a lot of the other aggro decks, but people are playing a lot less Faith Shields these days. Looping things like Back Alley Haymaker and snapping in zero gravity lifts are just as strong as they will ever be, and I just don't think there's any reason to really doubt this character in the slightest. Ochako 1 is just very good at killing people, and her gameplay loops are still just some of the strongest around. Next up, let's look at Todoroki 1. I actually think Todoroki 1 is quite good, guys. Probably somewhere in the bottom half of B tier, but really wanting to inch his way up there as well. I think this guy got a lot of really powerful tools on actually all 3 of his symbols between all of the Heroes Clash stuff. And I think this guy is actually a really solid like defensive control deck that scales well into the late game. And he's just got so many cool things to do now. The new fire attacks are crazy. Water's got so many cool tech pieces. Chaos is a defensive powerhouse now. I think Todoroki 1 is quite slept on right now, and I think he's got a lot cooler things to do than just like surviving for 20 turns and then making 15 damage tape swings. Next, let's look at Ito 1. I think Ito 1 is fine, probably somewhere in like the top half of C tier. I think his character is super duper solid. His poke game is really strong. His control game got some cool new elements, and overall I think the character is just super decent. I think he's a very niche character, but he plays that niche very well, and I think that's like the epitome of what a C tier character should be doing. Next, let's look at Shigaraki 1. I think Shigaraki 1 is quite good, guys. I'm gonna put him somewhere in the top half of B tier. Shigaraki 1 is really solid. He's got so many good new things on all of his symbols. Obviously, Villainous Waylay coming into the fold is what really elevated this character. The fact that he's got some really scary stuff now on Evil and Fire, things like Piercing Needle are really scaring him, Ignited Arrow. He's got so much speed pump now on like Seizing the Advantage and Fast as Flame. This guy is just super legit now, and I don't think he's a character that can be slept on anymore now that he's got a lot of the cards that he was really wanting back in the set 1 and set 2 days. Next, let's look at Asui. Asui's going to be our first S tier top dog character. Asui's freaking crazy, man. The fact that she lost Crow and Frog is a bit of a bummer, but set 3 brought her so much new power, all kinds of crazy stuff on the water symbol. The things like Exhausted Exclamation and Prone to Dry Eyes just made her nuts. She's got access to a lot of really powerful tech attacks now. Things like Freezer Burn in her are just plain messed up. And at the end of the day, even after the storm of bans in set 2 and the Crow and Frog ban, Asui is just as good at doing what she was doing back in the set 1 days, which is just like occasionally drawing all of her attacks turn 2 and killing you, or surviving into a critical mass game state playing Immaculate Water defense and then just drawing 10 attacks and playing them all. Next up is Aoyama 1. I was really hard on Aoyama 1 back in the last tier list, but I think he's a little better than I've ever given credit for. Maybe not D tier material, but maybe somewhere in like the bottom half of C. I think Aoyama 1 is just super okay. There's like some really cool builds with him. I think Cannon Blast Aoyama builds are very cool. I think Hulking Grimace Aoyama builds are very cool. Just being able to make one big massive attack and then also being able to make these really expensive attacks super free is just very neat and has some cool applications to it. The character is super fine. He just wants to pump stats on things, and he's very okay at doing that. Next up is True Form All Might. Man, this guy stinks. He's our first D tier character, guys. No surprises there. This guy is really mediocre. His game plan is just very not flawed per se, but it's just not very strong, and he's not very good at enacting it. Like, it's just so niche to the point where he just falls into mass obscurity. I think if this guy had been printed with some proper support, maybe the game plan would be fine, but there's really just no reason not to play him over any of the other All Mights who are like stronger than him on every turn of the game. Next up, we have the aforementioned All Might 1, and I think this guy got really good. I'm gonna put him somewhere in the bottom half of B tier. I think All Might 1 got a lot better. There were already some super spicy things going on with him in set 2 with stuff like Howitzer, Impact Cyclone, and the weird like Earth Fury things going on. He was doing really cool stuff. The Pippa spice that kind of debuted in Vegas has been gaining a lot of traction ever since, and I think he's just even better at doing that in set 3 now. His game plan is actually super solid, and more importantly, it's something that I think a lot of people aren't really expecting nowadays. Like, people just aren't running like these stat resets and stuff like that anymore, and even more so now that if you stay on the Earth symbol, you're just even better at flipping those things because you have stuff like Seizing the Advantage. Next up is Kamui Woods, Mr. Tree Man. Tree Man good, guys. Tree Man real good. I'm going to put him somewhere in the bottom half of A tier. I think this guy is very good. Jose memes aside, Jose is a fantastic player and he pilots this deck amazingly. On top of that, he's got some really specific cards that help him now as well. Stuff like Petty Squabble on the Earth symbol is insane in tandem with him. and stuff like the exhausted exclamation on water is also incredibly powerful synergy. Kamui Woods is just a really great generic character, and anyone who has fantastic universus game mechanics and game knowledge is going to be able to put in a lot of work with him. Another character that I feel very similarly about is All Might 3, and amusingly enough, he's going to get the same placement too. All Might 3 is going to be somewhere in the bottom half of A tier. I think this guy is just very solid. You are just an 8 hand size, 30 health character that gets to put stats for free on all of your moves with very little decision making, very little room for error. This guy is just incredibly solid, and once again, like Kamui, if you have really good mechanics and really good game knowledge, you're just going to be able to pilot this guy to a lot of success. Next up, we have Ojiro 1. Ojiro 1 is going to be our next stinker. I think this guy is pretty D tier. I don't think this character is very strong. Again, his gimmick is cool. Flipping your rival's foundations is really neat, but having to lose all of your own in the process is not nearly as neat, and the other only real benefit from that is just getting to put a bunch of damage on things, but you don't really have access to like a ton of speed on these symbols or these packages, so it's not nearly as scary. And yeah, I mean, his ones per game provides speed, but that's not a ones per game. He's got an okay at best game plan, and I don't even think that he's very good at enacting it either. Next up, we have Shoji 1. I think Shoji 1 is very okay. I would probably put Shoji 1 like somewhere in the, maybe in like the kind of in the middle of C tier. This guy is really okay. Like, being able to just go and pick up things out of your discard pile is always very strong. He's got a ton of really busted zero diffs on all of his symbols that he can grab at his leisure, and just getting to put damage on a ton of throws, which he also has on a lot of his symbols, is strong. Next up, we have Mina 1. Mina 1 is okay, probably somewhere in the upper half of C tier. I think Mina 1 is super fine. Mina 1 is a character that is only as good as the cards inside of your deck, and also your luck at finding them in the opportune moments. And so sometimes she's really great when you get to high roll. Sometimes she's like super okay when you kind of get the low roll of things. Next up, we got Mount Lady. Mount Lady is unfortunately another stinker. I think Mount Lady's game plan is very cool and very cute. Like, one of the D tier characters that probably has like the coolest concept, but man, she's just really bad at doing it. She's so slow and she's so clunky. The way she actually enacts that game plan is just extremely underpowered. Next up, let's talk about All Might 2. I think All Might 2 is really good. Probably somewhere in the upper half of B tier. I think All Might 2 is fantastic. This guy got so much good support in set 3. His fire builds right now are off the freaking charts. This guy is so good at just putting a million damage on things really quickly, and now on the fire symbol, he's actually got things to cheat his attack lineup. Milling the top 4 for essentially 4 damage spread is just not actually a cost in the slightest, and I think this guy is just very good at killing people. Speaking of being very good at killing people, Ochako 2 is immaculate. This character is so freaking good. High A tier for sure. At her core, this character has always been very strong. Like, the character just has fantastic words printed on her. +2 speed to all my moves, and then if my move hits you, I practically win. Like, Ochako 2 is just amazing, and now in set 3 she really has the card pool. She's got so much messed up stuff to do on death now, man. Things like Hulking Grimace and Villainous Waylay and Gigantic Explosion and Stun Grenade, like, oh my god, the attacks you can put in Ochako 2 decks are just maniacal now, and I think they've really elevated this character from good to absolutely great. Next up, the legendary Ida 2. Ida 2 is fine, not nearly as bad as we used to give him a lot of credit for. The character is just okay. He's got like a couple new cards that he interacts really well with in set 3, but overall this guy did not change very much. He's still just very decent. Next up is Asui 2. This character is still a massive stinker, guys. Asui 2 is not very good. She does not have a good game plan, and she's not even good at executing it. There's just overall like no real true reason to play this character over anything else if you're trying to do any of the things that she wants to do. There are just other guys way better at doing it. Next up, we have Pikachu. I choose you, Pikachu, to go in the bottom half of B tier. I think Kaminari is very solid. This character always just has like max potential for max blowout. And he got a lot of really cool cards in set 3 that help him enact that game plan quite a bit. The dude's just really solid at what he does. The only thing that really holds this character back, in my opinion, is that he's got like a pretty small window in which he wants to kill you, and if he just doesn't find the moves to kill you in that window, the character loses a lot of steam really fast. Next up, let's check out Kurogiri. Kurogiri is fine. I'd probably put him somewhere in like the bottom half of C tier. Kurogiri is like super okay. He's got a really niche defensive ability that is very good against certain decks and has a lot of like, it has a lot of ceiling, right? It's a solid ability overall, but just has a lot of really good applications against a few characters and a few attacks and lineups. But at the end of the day, the character doesn't exactly like kill people in any way whatsoever. He's just not very good at doing that. And if you really want to play Kurogiri's game plan, you might as well just be playing Toru 2, who is a much better character. Next up is Midnight. Ooh, guys, Midnight is so freaking solid. Midnight is a very strong character. There's quite simply put nothing wrong with her per se. Midnight just has a lot of really good words on her. Like being able to reset your hand is at any point in time is just so nice. Being able to put a ton of speed or a ton of speed penalties on anything is very nice. The character is just overall very solid, very consistent, and very poised to take on a good bit of the meta in some pretty unique ways. Somnambulism is a card that's very good against almost every S and A tier deck. On top of that, Chaos was one of the biggest benefactors of set 3, and Midnight plays Chaos so freaking well, like an absolute champ. Character is just very strong. If anything, is maybe just a little too honest sometimes, and that's really what keeps her from excelling past the point of B tier. You can make some really freaking crazy moves as Midnight, but you definitely have to pay for them in very honest ways. Next, we got Present Mike 1. This guy stinks. Mill is just still not a like very real viable strategy in the game. I think you can definitely build a Present Mike Mill deck, and there are times where you will occasionally mill an opponent for the win, but that's not like a super real game plan yet. We just don't have the cards to support that, and if you want to play him in other ways, there's just much better things to be doing on much better characters. Next up, we've got Sato 1. I think Sato 1 is actually pretty legit. I'd probably put him somewhere up in the top half of B tier. I think this guy's really solid. The Earth symbol just got so freaking good in set 3 that anyone who's just really good at like putting the opponent's board down and cycling through cards, that's just a fine set of words to have on a really good Earth symbol main deck. There's just nothing wrong with this guy. He's very solid at what he does. Being able to see a bunch of cards and find all your really good ones is just a huge consistency benefactor. On top of that, there's just so much stun and board control on Earth and Order that just piling even more of it on with Sato is just super strong. Next up is Toru 1. I think Toru 1 is a pretty underwhelming character, but she is really good, decent sideboard tech. I'm gonna put her probably somewhere in like the middle of C tier. The character is very okay. Again, she's got really good sideboard applications against a lot of characters in some specific decks, but as her own standalone character, I've never thought that there was really anything to truly write home about Toru 1. I think she's always just been okay. I think if you're not consistently getting very high value flashes out of her, there's just not really a reason to be on the character. Next up is Gran Torino. I think Gran Torino is actually very decent. Probably somewhere in the top of C tier. I think this guy is just strong. I think Gran Torino's always been very underrated. I just don't think anyone's ever really like labbed him enough to figure out something super spicy. I think another issue with Gran Torino is that like the packages he wants to play on those symbols just play under some very generic characters a lot better. Like, hey, you want to play like a generic AR charge package, you should just be on like Ochako or something. If you want to play a generic good symbol punch package, you should probably just be on like All Might 3 or something. If you want to play Void Kicks, you should just be on Eraserhead. The list goes on and on. So I don't think there's like a direct reason to play this guy over those characters, but if you did want to, I think you'd have a pretty decent time. Next up is one of the resident hype men of Heroes Clash, and that's Midoriya 2. Midoriya 2 I actually think is quite good. Somewhere in the top half of B tier, I think Midoriya 2 is very solid. His ramp got a lot better. He's got so many more powerful on-stage pieces that he can tutor out now that only get stronger when you have multiple of them, i.e. one with nature. Having several one with nature is just so crazy and synergizes so freaking well with his character. This guy's just very solid at what he's doing. I think he's always been pretty underrated, but a lot of the advancements of the Earth symbol in set 3 is what's really propelled him to new heights nowadays. In a fairly similar vein is also Bakugo 2. I think Bakugo 2 got a lot better, and I also never felt terrible about this character. Somewhere in the bottom half of B tier, he's super fine. He's got a lot of cool new pieces. Gigantic Explosion is really big in this character. Obviously, stun grenade builds are very good. That card just elevates a lot of decks, really. Very solid character all around. Next up is Hatsume Mei. I think this character also lies somewhere in the bottom half of B tier. This character started off so strong in the meta and just hardcore fell off as time goes on, and I will attribute a lot of that to learning the standard decks becoming so good, but for the most part, I think people just figured out that there were a lot better ways to do the things you want to do. If you're trying to play like generically good life stuff, there's a ton of characters that kind of just play it a lot better, and even if you're trying to play some of the more niche packages like all weapons or evil weapons, there's also kind of better hosts for that as well, but still, she is not one of the worst ones you could pick. Very solid character. Next up is Mina 2, and oh, how it pains me to do this, but Mina 2 is not very good, guys. Mina 2 is way down here in the D tier. This character's game plan is like, it's cute at best. At the end of the day, the character just needs support. Like, this character could honestly be really good. Like, her theme is cool. Her theme is cool, and if she had the proper cards to back it up, she could be a true deck and a true threat, but as is, there's just not really any reason to play her. Currently, the upside of the effects that she has access to at the cost of putting cards in her card pool aren't even as good as most effects that don't cost putting cards into your card pool. It's just not a viable strategy right now, and that leaves her way down here in the D tier. Next is Kirishima 1. Kirishima 1 is still very, very bad, guys. He is super cool with Season the Advantage, but that is literally it. This character still got extremely nerfed to the ground. His whole play style, his whole game plan, his loops, his gameplay loops, they just aren't very good anymore. He's extremely inefficient at doing what he wants to do, and he will remain so unless they ever roll back some of his nerfs. Next up on the chalking block is Ochako 3. I think Ochako 3 is very cool, probably sits herself somewhere in like the middle of C tier. Basically, the explanation I gave for Gran Torino, I can give the exact same explanation for Ochako 3. She has a lot of really cool abilities, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to play the packages that she really wants you to play, there are just much better characters to be putting that on. But if you do choose her, again, you're not going to have a very terrible time. You're going to have a very decent experience playing her. Next up is Shoto Todoroki 2. This guy is very strong. Gonna set him somewhere in the top half of B tier for sure. This guy's just really scary, man. He puts a lot of stats on things. He does it for free. He does it very early before a lot of decks have a chance to stabilize and actually like protect themselves from it. Like the hidden text on Todoroki 2 is that if you go first, your opponent just starts like 7 or 8 life down, because there's just no way they're blocking like your 6 speed opener after you stun 6 on them. Like it's just really crazy. It's super good, and then being like a pseudo 7-hander as you go through the game and continue to get your pokes in, it's just really solid. This guy's just got a lot going for him, and his attack packages improved significantly in set 3. Next up is Stain 1. Stain 1 is very okay. He is almost D tier, but I'm gonna put him like all the way at the bottom of C tier because I got the soft spot for him. Laceration did not make this character good. None of Stain 2 support having the all symbol, which was probably his best symbol. Doesn't help him at all. This guy just didn't get anything, despite there being a lot of Stain cards in set 3. They didn't actually offer any real benefit to him. I think if you want to force this character, he's super fine, but if you really want to like play the card that he's asking you to play, there's just better ways to do it. Next up is Dabi. We're gonna give him like some top half of C tier treatment. This guy's super fine. He plays a lot of the packages on his symbols like a boss. Being able to pass stats is really strong, and just like Midnight, the Chaos symbol got so much better in set 3, and he plays it really well on top of being the perfect home for Twisting Azure Inferno, which is a truly messed up card. Next up is our first Endeavor. Our first Endeavor is super okay, also very bottom half of C tier. Just like a lot of other characters, his packages that he wants to play on his symbols did get a lot better in set 3, but he doesn't really bring anything unique to the table over those characters to want to pick him over a lot of the other strong generic earth or fire characters that are already trying to play those exact same main decks. Next up is Tokoyami 2. This guy actually did get some cool support in set 3, and like there was maybe some neat decks there, but then Crow and Frog got taken out back, so this guy is still super doo-doo. I don't think that Tokoyami 2 is very good at all. He's so niche, and he's still, even after getting like some some pretty nice support cards. I still don't feel like anything he wants to do is really good enough to warrant doing. Anytime I've tried to play a Tokoyami 2 deck, it just does not feel very good at all. Next up is Sero 2. This guy is actually really cool. I like his game plan a lot. I just don't think he's super strong at it. He's like somewhere in the top half of C tier. There's like a couple set 3 cards that he does have some pretty cute interactions with, but overall, my stance on him really hasn't changed very much. Very cool character, but still living in somewhat mediocrity. Next up is Himiko Toga. Man, Toga has had quite the journey through the meta game, but I think she's still come out as pretty strong. I'm gonna put her probably in this like top half of B tier. I think Toga's just great, man. Toga's just a very generically powerful character. Obviously, the big deck has always been Life Toga, even as it transformed into like the Railgun, Alleyway Ambush, Unfun Togas. It is still at its core Life Toga, and while the life symbol did not get much in set 3, it did get carbo loading and bench press, and those cards are absolutely insane in Toga. If you think Toga has fallen off in set 3, you have clearly not played against Gym Bro Toga yet, and pun intended, you should absolutely get some reps in against it. Next up is Shinso. Mr. Shinso is not very good. This guy is once again quite thematic and very cute, but I really can't say anything much more than him. Just what he wants to do is just not very solid. Trapping yourself into one zone is not fantastic, and then like his ability to hit a card out of your opponent's hand and occasionally mess them up is just not good. Like, that ability is basically the entire character, and sometimes it literally does nothing, which just feels extremely bad to play. Next up, let's look at Ibarra. Man, I think Shiozaki is really solid, man. I'm gonna put Shiozaki like super high up here in the C tier. Honestly, she could maybe even be B tier. I just don't think anyone has like proven it yet. But this character is really solid, man. Being able to just like recur so many attacks on life symbol with stuff like meteors and her new promo card. Her new promo card is really good on its own, but especially in tandem with her, makes it really hard to play against her. I used to just kind of see this character as a worse way to play like the Life Toga decks or the Water Asui decks, but now the more that I look at the like unique things that she's doing on any of those symbols, I more so see her now as like an alternate Tokoyami. A lot worse at it for sure, but only because he's just so nuts at it, but still uniquely different enough to make me respect the character. Next, we're going to look at my sweet Eraserhead. Oh, my beloved Aizawa. I think Eraserhead's very good. Top half of A tier for sure. This guy is immaculate. If you bring Eraserhead to an event and somehow across the entire day make 0 mistakes, you are probably just going to win the event. Unfortunately, that is very hard, even for some of the best players in our game. But even if you're not the perfect Eraser player, you can still ascertain an immense amount of value on this character. He is very good at surviving almost anything the game can throw at him, and now in set 3, all of his symbols have received extremely more efficient and more consistent ways to actually close out games as well, which was always just his biggest problem. Speaking of surviving anything, let's talk about Mineta 2. Mineta 2 is also super good. Feel very similar about him. Probably like, actually, he'll probably be like right in the middle of A tier. I think the guy's just really good. Set 3 didn't bring him like a ton of new things, but the character was always really strong. The only thing that ever stopped the character from being super good was the Momo meta, right? Like, Momo is just like a super nearly auto lose matchup for him, and when Momo was hands down the best deck in the game, that just didn't really create an environment this guy could thrive in. And while I do think that Momo got a lot better now post banlist, I still don't think that she's a character that like everyone and their mother is going to be playing at all the events you go to. So if you can dodge the occasional Momos, man, this guy is just absolutely fantastic. He's really good at outpacing Kirishima. He's really good at slowing down Asui and Tokoyami. Everyone's just a very well-rounded character. I think he's got good matchups across the board and is really consistent at doing what he wants to do. Next up is Monoma. Monoma is super duper fine. He's going to be very low on the C tier for me. I think the character is very average. Most of the time, snatching your rival's character. I mean, it's really good when you're getting to punish 5-handers by just outvaluing them. I mean, a lot of 5-handers would just be busted if they were 6-handers. That's kind of what Monoma brings to the table. Even if your deck isn't actually made for what they want to do, odds are you're going to be able to find some value there. Really good sideboard tech for sure. Monoma is just fine. You know who is not fine though? That is Present Mike 2. Like Present Mike 1, I don't feel very strongly about this character at all. Way down here in the D tier, basically the same explanations. Mill is still not a super viable strategy yet, and if you want to take advantage of the other things this character does, there's just way better ways to do it. Next, we have the last of the Idas that we will be talking about for today's video, and I think Ida 3 is the best of them. I think Ida 3 is very good. Top half of C tier for sure, which is not a bad place to be whatsoever. Like C tier is at the end of the day just like solid decks that there's not really anything wrong with per se. I think most of the time on tier lists, C tier ends up being like below average or like super mediocre, but that's not really how this game works, to be honest. So I think there's nothing wrong with being a high C tier character. Ida 3 is just good, man. Guy just gets really good value. Being able to get your momentum trains going has never really been his issue, and he just got a lot of cards that were pretty tailored to making him better on all three of his builds really across the board. Got some nice support, and I think Ida 3 is just in a fine position. He's just a really good mid-range 7 hand size character that can really set up some crazy kill turns that a lot of decks just aren't able to deal with. Next is Tetsu. Also another fine high C tier character. This guy is just great, honestly. Like, I'm not a big fan of 5 hand size characters, but even I can see the value in Tetsu. Being able to set up plays that just make your opponent's moves like completely worthless, and then be able to like value. Like, this character is just absolute value town. You get to make the most use of your 5 cards that I think any 5-hander in the game does, and then you just get to cheat a lot of your resources across your symbols and play the game not like a 5-hander at all, while still gaining a lot of the benefits of being a very strong one. Okay, so remember how I said we were done talking about Idas? We're kind of done talking about Idas, because Ingenium is really just like Ida 4. This guy is like okay. He's a solid mirror of Ida 1. I don't think he really takes advantage of the niches that Ida 1 fills quite as well, so he's going to make it somewhere in the bottom half of C tier. I think if you want to make like one big move like he does, the other Idas are kind of just a little bit better at doing it. Next up we have Fourth Kind. Man, Fourth Kind, huh? Fourth Kind, I'm going to be somewhere in the upper half of B tier for me. I think this guy is very good. The fact that despite the order symbol receiving almost nothing useful for its current decks in Heroes Clash, Fourth Kind can still take games away from a lot of these higher tier characters just goes to show what a powerhouse he is. Man, Pleiabody Fourth Kind is just absolutely gross, and he's still extremely good at doing what he wants to do and just demanding absolute control over the board state and the game state in those few early turns of the game. Next up is Ectoplasm, the math teacher. Guys, the math teacher he's not very good. He's not really good at all. His game plan is okay. Like, trading a 3 difficulty character to full block and attack is not bad by any means. Like, if there was a 3 difficulty foundation that you could just remove to full block and attack, that would be insane. And that is basically like the tech that he gets, right? Like, that's essentially what you get when you play Ectoplasm, and he just doesn't do it very well. Like, if he could search his characters, or if he had like moves that built them in or picked them up or something, I would feel so much better about this guy. If Ectoplasm could consistently get to use his enhance 3 times a game, I would think this character is very solid, but sometimes you don't even get to use it once per game, man, and that's just sad. Guy just feels very bad to play sometimes. Speaking of these 5 hand sized menaces, let's talk about Cementos, man. Cementos was supposed to be really broken and then just turned out to be kind of solid, and I think that's still where he is now. Gonna put him somewhere in the bottom half of B tier. I think Cementos is just fine. Character is pretty good. Got some cool new things on a couple of his symbols in set 3, but overall his game plan is still just the same, and it's not necessarily a bad one by any means. Next up is Snipe. I think Snipe is also quite good. Definitely high C tier for me. I think Snipe's always been really solid. I think he's a character that just only a few people have ever really messed around with, but the words on Snipe are just flat out really strong. Snipe with Excited for Blood is still just an absolute drug that I think a lot of people really are sleeping on. I would not ignore Snipe. I think he's a deck that, once again, a lot of these like top row of C tier characters I think could easily be B tier. It just hasn't really been proven yet. I think Snipe's another one of those strong characters that are just waiting to be cracked in half. Alright, my friends, it has been a little minute since we touched the S tier, so I guess that's finally why we've arrived at Tokoyami, because he's going right up there. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. The only thing that's really changed is before he would have been one of the only 2 S tier characters. Now there's just a few people up there with him, but Tokoyami is still easily one of the best decks in the game. I don't think he's the singular towering over everyone else best deck anymore, but he's still easily a top dog, probably gonna win Worlds. At the very least, I think everyone with the good seeds in day 2 are gonna be playing him. Losing Crow and Frog and Stronger in Darkness was like a big hit in the grand scheme of things. Tokoyami was just already so far ahead of all the other decks that even 2 massive bans like Crow and Frog and Stronger in Darkness, they do bring him down a lot, but that still leaves him so far still above the rest of the curve that I don't think there's anything to worry about when it comes to Tokoyami. He is not going anywhere anytime soon. Still one of the best aggro decks that you can pick up. And now all the way on the opposite end of that spectrum is Gunhead. Gunhead is our next stinker, guys. I think this character is really bad. I would play him like over the present Mikes, but that's pretty much the most praise I can give Gunhead. I just don't think his abilities are very good at all. They don't even really work the way you'd expect them to. Like, he puts speed on the throws. Why would I want to put speed on the throws, man? I just don't get it. Gunhead's like an extremely underwhelming character. He's another one of those that like you play him and you're just like, why? Why am I doing this? Just to suffer? Next up we got Selkie. Selkie is okay. I'd probably put him somewhere down in the trenches of C tier. The guy is very fine. He's got a very clear game plan. I don't think he's like super good at enabling it, but he does at least do some things uniquely. Like, if you just want to turn off your opponent's best foundation for the entire game, there isn't really another character that's going to be able to do that, no questions asked. So he's at least cool in that regard, and he's definitely got some cool builds going for him. Again, a lot of other characters play his builds a lot better, but if you do choose him for the slight unique things he brings to the table, you won't have a miserable gameplay experience by any means. Next is Uwabami. I think Uwabami is fine. I almost want to put her in D tier because I do think she desperately needs some specific support, but I think even without support really coded towards her, the character is still very decent, that I think she's going to make her way somewhere in the C tier. Even without like a bunch of really powerful 3 damage moves to shove into my deck, I can put like 1 in my deck, and the second I find it, this character really starts trucking along, and I think the second that she gets some like real support dedicated to her, she's going to be very scary. And even without like specific Uwabami support, the focused attack builds are really good, and she can do some cool things with like Texas Smash on the Earth symbol, so definitely not a character I think you should sleep on. Next up is one of the most resonant slept on characters for the entire existence of the game, and that is Hantasero. Hantasero is so freaking good, guys. Way up here in the B tier, one of the strongest of the B tier. This guy is just so good, man. I think Sero has always been one of those characters that like if you fight a really good Sero player, you really need to be on top of your game or they're just going to get run over. And if you want to go the full hard hand control and destruction routes, he's got so many ways to play that on the void symbol, it's not even funny. Sero's just got a ton of stuff to do in set 3, and I think he's one of those characters that the specialists of are going to make even the strongest A and S tier characters quake. I think it's kind of one of the definitive things about a lot of the best B tier characters is if you put them in the hands of someone who's really specialized in those characters, they can easily feel A or S tier, especially if you on the opposite end of that don't know the matchup at all. Speaking of knowing matchups, let's talk about Midoriya 1. I think Midoriya 1 is very okay. Gonna put him somewhere down here in the trenches of C tier. I think this guy is just fine. The occasional specialist of sound for free is not bad by any means, and there are situations where you can orchestrate your opponent into a position where they just can't stop your plus 10 damage move, and that is very cool. Now that there's not like a million Kirishimas running around, this guy feels a little bit better to play, but I don't think I can, in good faith, really put him much higher than this. The other half of this pair is the one who got the real glow up. I think Bakugo 1 is quite good now. I'm going to put him like pretty up here in the bottom of B tier. I think Stun Grenade just opened up so many things for this character to do that it's not even funny. Stun Grenade and Gigantic Explosion, basically all of the things that like really brought Bakugo 2 to the forefront now, Bakugo 1 also takes fantastic advantage of. I think this guy has got a lot of room to really shine. This character eats a ton of 7-handers absolutely alive. Like, the only thing that really holds Bakugo back is like those decks that can like face tank 20 damage on turn 2 and then deal that back at him on turn 3. Those are the only things he really doesn't want to see. Next, let's talk about Jiro. Freaking Jiro has risen to the absolute top once again. Jiro's freaking insane, man. This character really never got worse. She's always been an obnoxious aggro powerhouse, and while they did take away Unwavering Slash from her, that really was the only thing that kept her being like insanely oppressive lately. Seizing the Advantage has come in and really brought a lot of that oppression back with Jiro. She sits so hard in the S tier, it's not even funny. A Jiro that can put even more free stats on her moves and interact with your board is just so obnoxious. There is no reason that a deck that can put out like 40 damage on turn 1 with no risks whatsoever can also come and target my best pieces on my board that offer me even a slight chance of survivability. It's just super obnoxious, it's super oppressive. Jiro is very powerful right now, and she completely dodged the ban list. That's one of the biggest things here, is like seizing the advantage surviving the ban list is really wild, because while the ban list did bring Tokoyami and Kirishima down a peg, it just let those other 3 best decks survive even more. And I think it's no secret that either Jiro or one other deck not only came out as the biggest winners of that ban list, also came out as probably the new best deck in the room. Our next candidate is Kaminari 2 Dot. Oh, good old Denki 2. I think this guy's pretty strong, actually. Somewhere in the top half of C tier for sure. I think this character's always been pretty solid at what he does, but he definitely got some super cool new stuff in set 3. Him with Sudden Death Assault is very scary. The Chaos Symbol as a whole, as we've talked about, just got so much better. And then stuff like Training Weights is also very cool. He's just got a ton of cool new shenanigans that are really fun to mess around with, and are also pretty effective as well. We were just talking about him, but now we've come up upon our big red boogeyman himself, and even after a very vicious errata, I think this character is still super top dog material. Kirishima 2 is still one of the best decks in the room for sure. He's going to be a little bit lower on it than he was before, but I don't think that the simple errata has really been enough to phase him completely out of it whatsoever. He is still one of the most efficient, most safe, and most powerful decks you can put on the table, and while his character card did take a hit, it was a very minor one, all things considered, and the big thing is none of the cards inside of his deck actually took a hit at all. The insane power level of the Earth deck that you play under him is still just as strong. You still have unlimited access to Hardened Jab, to Back Alley Haymaker, to One with Nature, to Seizing the Advantage, just so many extremely potent pieces that even though Kirishima's character card I think has been successfully brought into line, his character card is where it should be. The fact that he just plays the Earth symbol so generically good and the Earth symbol being still way too strong is I think what just truly keeps this guy in such a top dog slot. Next up is Momo 2. Momo 2 is going to sit somewhere in the middle of C tier, I think. Momo 2 has very much Uwabami syndrome, where like she definitely doesn't have the specific support geared towards her that she should have to be as strong as she could be, but the words on her are still like strong enough to make her viable without that support. I think even with just the crumbs that she has to use, the Eraserhead starter deck brought a lot of things for her to do, makes her character like actually playable now under that symbol, which is super cool. I think the character is very solid, and I'm eager to see as the weapons expand on these symbols, I'm eager to see what she can bring to the table. But for now, solid middle of C tier character. Ending this little DLC trend here is Aoyama 2. Aoyama 2 I cannot praise nearly as much as the others. I think this character is just very bad. A 7-hand size character that wants to burn himself and debuild himself for extremely little payoff is just an absolute oddity. I don't see the benefit in playing this character over literally anyone else on any of those symbols. He does extremely generic things. Like if you want to pump stats on air, death, or evil, there's just way better ways to do it. Speaking of pumping stats, man, let's take a look at Endeavor 2. I think Endeavor 2 is actually super solid, man. Real top of C tier material for this guy. I think he's just such a generically good character. Like he just has 3 really solid enhances that can be played on any movesets and are all very positive exchange rates. Nothing feels bad about this guy. And then right next to him we have his starter deck buddy Eraser 2, who I also feel very similarly about. Super top of C tier material for this guy. Eraser 2 is very solid. He's got some strong symbols, he's got very generically good abilities, he's a fantastic sideboard piece for decks that are really reliant on certain moves. He's just got a lot of great things going for him, and his exchange rates are just always good. Like, he never feels bad to play. You either get damage in or you get to draw a card. It just always feels like a really, really good exchange. Next up is Mr. Koji Koda, who I'm actually going to put right next to Eraser. I think Koda's super solid, man. Before Crow and Frog, I almost would have maybe put this guy in B tier. I think he's like super good at what he does. The only thing that really restricts him is he has to play with ally cards, and there's only so many really like solid ally cards. So he basically just has one symbol, but it is a really strong symbol with a lot of really good ally cards, so it's not super bad. Koda's just great. Like, sometimes he just takes an extra turn, and getting to turn anything into Crow and Frog is really fantastic. A really decent character that has a ton of room to grow as they print more ally cards. All right, so remember how we were talking about that other biggest benefactor of the ban list when we were talking about Jiro? Well, here he is, guys. Ojiro 2 is, I think, the best deck in the game right now. This guy is freaking bananas. So now that all 5 of these guys are up here, I kind of want to talk about how the ban list affected this, because before, I think there were 5 best decks. Kirishima and Tokoyami were the top 2, and then right under them were these 3, Ojiro, Jiro, and Asui. Now with the bans bringing Tokoyami and Kirishima in line, I think it's more of just a flat 5 right now. But I think that because of the bans hitting these 2 specifically, Ojiro gets to really rise to the top. I think there's an argument to be made for Jiro as well. These 2 are like so close in power level now, it's not even funny. Jiro, the only thing about Jiro is like to really do unfair things to you before you play the game. Jiro needs momentum, so you have to do like some cheeky stuff to get that, or wait until turn 3. But Ojiro, man, you give him one student of the art, and it's a lot like a Jiro being able to use sound waves on turn 2 against you. That's just how strong it is. He's just so consistent at just beating the living life out of you before you get to play the game. And I think that touching Kirishima's character card, but not anything in the earth symbol as a whole, is what is really going to lead to Ojiro outshining everything else in the league right now. Once again, after talking about one of the best decks, we're going to go all the way down to the other end of the spectrum for Shoji 2. I don't think Shoji 2 is very good at all. Super underwhelming character. He's got a very unique mechanic, but the thing that makes that mechanic unique is it's just a unique cost. The benefits that he gets from it aren't actually unique in any way. They're just like a bunch of generic effects slapped on from other cards in the game. I just need a lot more cards that say remove Duplo arms counters to do a super cool, unique, and insane thing, because right now removing Duplo arms counters just to have like infinite wall clings, that just doesn't really make for a very impressive deck in my opinion. Shoji 2 has a lot of potential, but he does need that support to come in and help him out. Next up is Sato 2, and Sato 2 is kind of very similar. I think this guy is super underwhelming. I think +2 damage to all your moves at the cost of like basically not being able to block attacks is like not a super good exchange rate. Now, when you get things like your talented bakers going off, it is really positive and it can lead to some super strong gameplay loops, but he needs a lot more support to make that strategy super viable. You got Stain 2, man. I think Stain 2 is actually pretty strong. I'm going to try and shove my bias aside because this is a deck that I really like. I'm going to put him somewhere in the bottom of B tier. I think he is very solid. He's just a very solid 7 hand size aggro character. Void and Evil did get a bunch of really cool new weapons in set 3, so it doesn't feel nearly as bad as it did with Stain 1 back in set 2, and he's got some really cool control elements to him as well, and I'm eager to see him expand as the weapons on his symbols expand as well. Next up is 13. I think 13 is super okay. She's going to be somewhere in this bottom half of C tier. She's really fine. 13 has some really cool control elements going on with her that I think are very unique to her and give her a really cool niche. The issue is that she just doesn't really kill people at all in the slightest. Kind of has a big Kurogiri syndrome. Next up is Shigaraki 2. I think Shigaraki 2 is very underexplored territory. I think this guy has a lot of potential. Gonna put him somewhere down here in the bottom half of B tier. Again, another really cool 7 hand size aggro character that has some super cool things unique to him. There are so many cool ways to both cheat and use momentum in chaos that it's not even funny. And then under death, he gets really cool momentum outs on all those fury builds. When you're playing this guy, you're basically just playing Asui on any of these 3 symbols, and that is very cool. Next up is Toru 2. We're gonna finally jump back here into the top tiers with Toru 2 because I think this character is super solid. Gonna put her somewhere here in the bottom half of the A tier. I think a lot of people thought this character was gonna be way better than she actually ended up being, but Just because she didn't live up to like the best deck in the room expectations doesn't mean she's not very strong. Tora 2 is incredibly solid. She is really good at manipulating the game state however way she wants it, and she benefits no matter how your opponent plays into her. She has really good meta matchups. She's very fantastic against things like Tokoyami. Tora 2 is just a very efficient and punishing character, especially if you don't know how to play against her. That's my only real issue with her, is the higher you scale the top tables, the better people will be at playing against her. Next up we have Backdraft. Backdraft, the living meme. I think Backdraft is actually pretty okay. He's gonna be somewhere in like the bottom of C tier for me. This guy's just super fine, man. Thematically, he's very on point. Mechanically, he doesn't feel bad to play, and you can definitely take down a reasonable amount of games playing this character, which is way more than I can say for a lot of these really niche promo guys that don't have any specific support. Next up is Death Arms. I actually really like Death Arms, guys. I think this character is quite strong. Definitely like upper half of C tier material for me. I think being able to just like pinpoint down your opponent's 2 best foundations every single turn, while also just like resource ramping yourself way past them and buffing your big old thick moves. This guy's just great, man. This guy's fantastic. I think he's really good at doing what he does, and his game plan is really strong and also really unique. Like, what other character gets to do the things that he does? Next up is Nezu. Guys, I think Nezu is secretly very good. I'm gonna put Nezu somewhere here in like the middle of B tier. I think Nezu is just extremely strong. Being able to like toolbox whatever you need whenever you need it, as long as you've checked it at some point, is crazy powerful. In this game, because of checks, we go through our deck so fast, so odds are all of our best cards are going to end up in our discard pile pretty early on in the game. On top of that, you can build your deck to take advantage of this ability so efficiently. Being able to include so many 1-ofs and 2-ofs randomly within your deck that you can just grab whenever you need. On top of that, it's not hard to figure out what you need in certain situations, because you get to just look at your opponent's hand once, which if you kill them that turn is all you need. Nezu's just strong. He's got 3 very powerful abilities on his face. They all work in tandem with each other really well. I think the thing that truly holds this guy back is player skill and deck building skill. I think you got to figure out how to craft the perfect Nezu deck, and then you got to figure out how to play it perfectly, which is no easy task. But I think the second it gets figured out, we're going to see a lot more of this guy running around. Next up, we've got to talk some Pussycats. The first up is their leader, Mandalay, who I actually think is quite solid. Gonna put Mandalay somewhere here in like our upper echelon of C tier. If you've not seen Staff Strike Mandalay go off, it does some pretty putrid things. It's very entertaining to watch, but at the end of the day, it's also a pretty strong deck in its own right. And even if you're not staff striking, like a lot of just the generic combos that you can do with her are really powerful. Her mechanics are super fun. Like they're very enjoyable to play around, and you actually get a pretty sizable amount of benefit from playing around them too. So very well designed, very fun, and very effective character. Next up is Pixie Bob, who I don't feel as strongly about, but she still squeaks into this bottom half of C tier for me. Losing Crow and Frog and Stronger in Darkness was a really big hit to her, to be honest. Without those cards, she does not feel nearly as good, so I think she's kind of in the waiting room now for some specific support. Next up is Ragdoll. Ragdoll is also super decent, somewhere here in the bottom half of C tier for sure. Getting to grab any card in your deck once is really strong, but that's kind of like all this character really does. If you're able to like set up her foundation, you can get her once per turn going pretty efficiently, and I just don't think that there's like a ton of value to be had playing Ragdoll. There is, however, a ton of value to be had playing Tiger. I think Tiger's really good. Gonna sit somewhere in the bottom of B tier for me, but I honestly think he has a lot more potential past that. I think Tiger's very strong. Oops All Throws Tiger on either the order or water symbols is really strong. Either way, you get all of that draw power, and also he's really hard to play against. Spooky is one of the most powerful defensive pieces in the game right now, and having it on your face is just super powerful. Our second to last character is Mr. Smash Might, All Might number 8 freaking million. This guy is very cool, somewhere in the bottom half of C tier for me. As we get more Smash cards in the game, he's only going to get better, but for the time being, I think he's pretty powerful with what he's got to work with. I don't think he really plays those packages better than like a couple of the other All Mights do. but he is very cool, and he is very fun, and again, if you do decide to pick him over those, you're not gonna have a bad time. And then our final character on the tier list is Miss Recovery Girl, and I think Miss Recovery Girl is just quite strong. Gonna be somewhere in the bottom half of B tier for me. I think it's hard to go wrong with Recovery Girl. You kind of just get to sit there and be an absolute menace while your opponent has to go like 2,000 IQ the entire time and make very little mistakes. Otherwise, you just get massive payoffs. She's a huge pub stomper, a huge noob punisher, and if you don't have a plan against Recovery Girl and know how to enact it perfectly, you're gonna have a very bad time playing against the character. Whew, we did it, guys. That's it. That's the whole tier list, man. 85 freaking unique playable characters, all beautifully covered, in depth, and categorized all in one probably not very short video. From here on out, we might have to start going into like an update style when we do these, just kind of taking the previous tier list and then rearranging things. I really don't like that because I feel like it's not as comprehensive, but I don't know how much longer I can convince people to sit here for an hour plus and watch these things because they're just gonna keep getting more and more out of hand. For the time being though, guys, this is your Alliteration Gaming quote-unquote definitive post-banlist, post-set 3 format HLC tier list. And once again, just a little reminder that these are simply put my opinions based off of my personal experiences, and if you have insight that I don't have, I would love to hear you fire off that insight and that feedback down in the comment section below. And also hit the like button while you're down there, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe if you want even more MHA CCG content. I know I always thank you guys for making it to the end of this video if you do, but truly a massive thank you if you made it all the way to the end of this. Absolute essay of a video. I hope that you garnered a ton of insight from it. I hope it was a very valuable viewing experience, and I hope that I can continue to provide you with more valuable viewing experiences. For now though, guys, that is truly all of the time I've got for this one sitting, but I definitely hope I can see you in the next one as well.